The diatonic scale has a weird and mathematically provable quality that distinguishes it from every other scale, and I'm going to prove that to you today using atonal theory. Typically when we talk about atonal theory, this is pitch class set theory. This is distilling collections of notes called sets into usually something called prime form, which shows us something about the nature of the intervals in that set. The reason this is not used for tonal analysis is because it frankly just doesn't make much sense most of the time. So the 0-3-7 set, that's both the major and the minor triads. They condense down to the same thing. What this really shows us is the nature of the intervals at play. 0 to 3 tells you that there is an interval of 3 half steps, or minor third. 3 to 7 is an interval of 4 half steps, or a major third, and 0 to 7 is a perfect fifth. So there are 3 notes, and there are 3 intervals, 2 thirds and a fifth. So it's kind of cool to see that it's the same intervals, it's basically the same stuff, and what order they're stacked determines how we perceive them. But it goes a little bit deeper than this. If you were to do this same analysis for sets that are much larger, you can get kind of lost in the weeds. So analysts have come up with something called the interval class vector in order to show how many of each interval there are in especially larger sets. So it's a series of numbers that show you how many minor seconds, how many major seconds, how many minor thirds, major thirds, perfect fourths, and tritones there are in a set. And this hinges on the fact that interval classes in this theory are different from intervals. Intervals are just the number of half steps between 2 notes. Interval classes is just the smallest form of whatever that is. If you have a ninth, that compresses down to a second. If you have a fifth, that inverts into a fourth, and so on. So you get interval classes 1 through 6 to represent the minor second through the tritone. And that is what is represented in the interval class vector. So if you're a composer and you want to use a set that is fairly consonant, you would want to have a set that has preferably zeros, maybe ones max in those first and last columns, representing no or very few minor seconds and tritones respectively. So you might settle on something like, well, the pentatonic scale. You plug that into the interval class vector and you see zeros at both of those positions, indicating that there are no harsh dissonances within that set. And true enough, no matter what you play with the pentatonic scale, it sounds fairly consonant. Now if you're Elliott Carter, you can use this to prove that your favorite sets, the all-interval tetrachords, have all different intervals, one of each. And this doesn't just tell us about the nature of the intervals themselves. This also tells us something about transposition. If you transpose this set by a minor second, because there's a 1 in that minor second spot, that 1 represents the one common tone you will get. So if you transpose it up a major third or a perfect fourth, you will also get exactly one common tone each time. The diatonic scale has all different notes, and this proves that there's kind of a gradient of smoothness that composers can use with this set and this set alone. There's only one other set that has this property of each number being different in the interval class vector, and the other one is, well, it's just a chromatic cluster, so that's not really useful as a scale. Maybe we'll talk about what really defines a scale at some other point, but suffice to say that for now, because there's a 6 in that perfect fourth slot in the vector, if you were to transpose the diatonic scale up or down a perfect fourth or fifth, which is what that represents, you would get 6 common tones. So if you're on C major and you want to go to F major or G major, you're only changing one note. This proves that this is the smoothest possible voice leading. The number of common tones that you have coincides with how smooth those modulations are going to be. So going from C to G or F is going to be fairly smooth. Going up or down a whole step gives you 5 common tones, which is not as smooth as it could possibly be, but it's still pretty smooth. If you go up a tritone, or you go up a minor second, or down a minor second, you will get 2 common tones each. Of course, it says just 1 at the end, and that's a weirdness with those tritones, because if you take a tritone and you transpose it up a tritone, you will get that same tritone again. Whereas if you take a major third or any other of those intervals, and you transpose it up that interval, you will get only one common tone. So it's just a quirk of how tritones work that you get two common tones if you see one in that. You just have to multiply it by 2. What this proves is that the most striking modulations are going to be up or down a half step or away a tritone. You don't really need this type of theory to prove this, but it shows that gradient of how smooth or not smooth your modulations are going to be. And I say modulation in kind of a broad sense here, not in the let's go from C to E sort of thing or what have you, but rather I have this collection, I'm going to transpose it wholesale up or down, and how many notes am I going to be able to have in common when I do that? That sort of a thing. It's a more abstract pitch class version of modulation than the strict typical tonal definition. All of which is to say that the diatonic scale has this unique property pretty much all to itself. The only other set, that chromatic cluster, is not very useful in this matter, because it just doesn't make any sense to use that as a scale. Now, this does shine a light on perhaps some of the ultimate failures of certain 20th century composers to come up with other types of musical grammar. Especially I'm thinking of Debussy and Stravinsky, who were interested in things like 6 or 8 note collections. The math just doesn't work out, because you can do this interesting thing with the diatonic scale, which is to say with all possible church modes as well, that you just can't do with, say, a hexatonic collection, whole tone scale, an octatonic scale. They just have either too few or too many notes to make anything like this work. They can have their own interesting interval class vectors, and composers use the unique properties of those to their own ends. I mean, Debussy using the whole tone scale, I mean, there's a lot you can do with this interval class vector, my goodness. But it's not quite the same level of complexity in terms of transposition as you get with the diatonic collection. Maybe this is one of the reasons why the old saying goes that there's a lot of music left to be written in C major.